Hello, I'm Carl Seibert. Thanks for joining me. This video will be the first of a two-part set on preparing images for publication on the Internet. Optimizing images for the Internet, if you want to say it that way. People tell me that this process is a pain in the neck. It's cumbersome. It just plain takes too much time. Well, let's use some good tools and invest some time up front for creating a good workflow. Then actually doing this stuff will be a snap. This is another one of those cases where thinking through the problem takes way more effort than solving the problem on a day-to-day basis. The first phase of our workflow will be all about inspecting and evaluating our photos, more or less the first moment that they arrive on our desktop. The second phase of the process and the second video will be all about physically preparing the images. We'll need to do some research first about what our own websites require, and then we'll set up the software. Thereafter, that part of the process will basically be a one-click affair. Of course, metadata plays a part here. This is, after all, a channel about metadata. I made the demo images in this video look halfway professionally prepared. If that's not realistic for your situation, and it might not be, I apologize. Preserving your sanity might make step one in the process be pasting information onto arriving photos. Yeah, that is drudgery, for sure. But done right, it takes way less time than it saves later on. It's really pretty darn easy, and I'll post another video on just that subject. For this demo, we'll be using XnView. XnView is a very affordable photo management application. It has excellent functionality for what we're going to be doing here. It's free, as in beer, for personal use, and it only costs €26 for company use. In other words, it's within anyone's budget. So let us pretend that we're web designers. Well, some of you aren't pretending. And this folder full of photos just landed on our desktop. We just grabbed it from a file sharing service like Box or Google Drive or something like that. Now let's go through this folder of photos, and we will get them all ready to go. And we'll do it at almost full speed. I'll talk a little, but I'll kind of try to keep my mouth shut mostly so that you can see how this would really go in real life. So, okay. No metadata, don't know what it is, didn't expect it. We're going to call the client about that because that could be something that is going to hurt us. Okay, all these Susie and Joe photos look fine. We have these two photos from some off-brand photographer that don't look quite right, but the files are probably okay. And we have this one that we expected. It's from a new photographer. It's probably okay. We probably get the rights to it and everything, but it'd be really nice if he captioned it and did some things like that. And we may speak to him about that. And we may suggest that he do a better job with captions and copyright information and stuff like that too. This crop just doesn't do it. So let's fix that. Okay. So, okay. Camera phone picture, a little over sharpened and over processed. And this guy looks fine. Okay. So we know that these guys are fine. The files are all right on these guys. Whoops. We want to take the one where we corrected the crop and not that one. So, all right. And we will just go ahead and resize these and get the compression that we want and all that. Okay, now in XnView, your results when you run a batch will come up selected if you're in the same folder, if you saved them into the same folder. So we're just going to grab them right out of XnView, and we're going to drop them over here on the media uploader for our test website. Just like that. And then let's go back over here to Sunset Man. And he has copyright management information in his EXIF data block. And that's not a particularly good thing because it's not where it's supposed to be. And moreover, I like to delete the EXIF data block because at this point in a picture's life, it's usually really pretty useless. But this one does not have any thumbnails in it, so that's not so horrible. So now we can just grab him straight out of XnView and drop him over here and upload him. And that was that. So, okay, that was less than 4 minutes to take care of this folder full of photos. And what we did was we inspected them all pretty carefully. We checked over and we made sure that we were pretty comfortable with the right situation on all these photos. We think we have a good license for all the ones that we actually processed, although there are a couple of questions. We have these two where the copyright notices didn't match. It looks like one is Creative Commons and one is a regular rights managed license. So that's kind of a question. And we noticed on this one over here that the caption left a little bit to be desired in that there really is no caption. There's the inline byline and nothing else. So something sloppy happened there, but gee, that's not all that surprising in today's world. And this one here, we just left for later because we're not at all sure about it. And if it is a copyright time bomb, I don't want to have it sitting on my website being one click away from publishing it and getting in trouble with it. So I'm going to come back in a minute and we will go through this process step by step and talk about what we're doing specifically and how to do it all. Now let's go back and slowly go through what we did and take a look at the process and see how this thing works. Basically, we kind of did two different things. We inspected these pictures. We looked at their metadata. We looked at their quality. We looked at their content. And then we went ahead and physically processed them and saved out the new files that we need in the format that we need with the compression and in the correct size and all of that. And it went pretty quickly. It took us less than 4 minutes to go through this folder full of files that I had kind of packed with problems to make things more interesting. So let's go back and let's inspect some stuff. First off, in XnView, it's a browser. You can navigate in all the ways that you would expect to be able to navigate in a browser. You can double-click and open folders. You have a Favorites tab over here and a Folders tab, both of which are navigators of the sort that everyone is used to. And we have, under our Navigator tab, we have an info panel that shows us all kinds of metadata. In fact, it shows us ultimately all of the different metadata that might appear on a picture, arranged in tabs according to where it came from, what data block, and we have here at the end the entire EXIF tool output for that particular picture. Not terribly user-friendly, but that can be really pretty handy. And if we look in our browser interface, we have all kinds of information displayed for us. And a little pop-up here actually could be a little bit annoying, but we'll go back to that in a minute. Under each thumbnail on the slide mount in the browser, we can display basically as much information as we can stand in XnView. And here we have the file name for this picture. Okay, that's pretty obvious. We need that. We have the pixel dimensions of the picture. And on the same line, we also have the file size of the picture in kilobytes. And I don't know about you, but I'm becoming a little bit annoyed at the pop-up, but we'll go into that in a minute. Here we have the copyright notice for the picture, and it's actually in red if the picture isn't selected. That's an important thing. Below that, we have the beginning of the caption, a little bit of the first line. And below that, I have chosen to display two lines in magenta here that show us copyright management information that might be hidden in the EXIF data block in a picture. And that could be an important thing for us because the last thing that we want to do is destroy somebody's copyright management information. That's just not a nice thing to do to our partners, and it's probably not a nice thing to do to ourselves either, considering that it's illegal and the penalties are pretty severe. So about that pop-up, you can turn on a tooltip in XnView and basically display any metadata that you want in that tooltip. And what I've done here is I've displayed the whole caption so that I don't have to actually call up the IPTC editor dialog to read a caption. And in addition to the caption, I have displayed once again all three of those places in the EXIF where copyright management information might be hiding. I have lately become more concerned about copyright management information hiding in the EXIF, so I've become a little bit obsessive about it. And your mileage may vary. You are invited to be as obsessive as I am or not. So with these two tools, I can kind of cruise around these photos and I can see everything I need to see about the metadata without actually opening the IPTC editor, which is yet another way to do it. In the IPTC editor, we see our standard IPTC fields, or a subset of them, on tabs, and we can tab through and we can find information that we need in a kind of a nice readable format. And as far as that goes, if we want to add some metadata, yes, indeed, we can do it here. Now, I should point out a quirk or a qualification or a caveat for XnView that I have to do every time I talk about XnView. And I really kind of wish that the developers would fix this, but it is what it is. This program is extraordinarily affordable, so you just can't have everything. The problem is in this editor, it doesn't display and cannot write some fields that are part of the core IPTC schema, and I hesitate to use the word core when I talk about IPTC fields. But seriously, there is an actual official in the standard core to the IPTC information. And it includes some fields that are not the original fields that are shared in the IIM and XMP data blocks. We're talking here about the rights usage terms field, which is kind of a favorite of mine, and the contact information fields for the creator of the picture. Phone number, email address, snail mail address, all of those fields. Those are actually really good fields, and they could be really important. You can't write to them with XnView, which is not the worst thing in the world because there are a lot of programs that can't read any XMP fields at all. The risk here, the serious risk here, is that yes, you could make an out-of-sync file that has differing information in the differing data blocks accidentally with XnView. And I do point out that the fields, the original fields that appear in both data blocks, are indeed written in both data blocks. So it's not like it's wildly standards non-compliant. It's just a little standards non-compliant. The editor dialog can be called, as I did, with the Command or Control-I keystroke, or you can call it from the menus up at the top, like so. Or you can call it from a pop-up menu, the right-click pop-up menu, like that. So that's how that works. Now, what about those fields that you can't see in that editor? What if you really need to find the photographer's contact information, assuming that it's on the photo, but it's not there? Well, if you're a photographer and you're a frequent viewer on this channel, you've heard me say over and over again that you need to make sure that all of your critical metadata is stated in some way in the IIM data block, in the old-fashioned data block, because there are so many programs, the Mac operating system being one that I can think of off the top of my head, that can't display XMP metadata at all. So the chances are really pretty good, like, well, let's go to this picture here. And this Susie photographer picture has Susie's phone number right in her copyright notice. So that'll work. This picture down here, however, doesn't. But if we need to get in touch with this photographer and we don't see the information that we need in the IPTC editor, we'll have to look around until we find it. And yes, indeed, in this info pane over here, if we look at our IPTC fields and we go up and down and just sort of bumble around, sure enough, here's a phone number and here's an email address so that we can get in touch with that guy. As I said, just about every existing field, every field that XFTool can see in any case, will be displayed over here somewhere. And it's just a case of looking around for it. Each one of these little groups is expandable. And you might have to dig back and forth a few times. If we look again on our slide mounts, we have the ability to color code photos. That could be really handy. As you can see, I color coded this photo red because we set it aside, remember, when we went through it. And it's simply a matter of clicking on the little dot and choosing a color. And if you hover up here on the slide mount, you get the dot. You can also apply a star rating. And there's also a tagging feature. Then down here at the bottom of the photo on the slide mount, we have some little overlay icons that are kind of handy. These on the right tell us which data blocks of metadata have information in them. This particular picture has EXIF information, IPTC information, which means the IIM data block, sometimes also called the IPTC-IIM data block, wow, and the XMP data block. This particular photo has GPS information in it. It's a camera phone photo. The little circular arrow tells us that this particular image has been oriented upright by the orientation tag in its EXIF data. And that's sort of important because we need to tell XnView or any other program that we save this picture in to go ahead and honor that tag and save the thing right side up, assuming that it is right side up. It's really annoying to save your pictures and all of your verticals fall over on their side. That's just kind of a drag. And trust me, I've seen it happen hundreds of times. And this little icon tells us that there are thumbnails attached to this image. And this is kind of important for us because in the EXIF data block, you can have thumbnail images that can take up, relatively speaking, a ton of space. You could have 10 or even 20 kilobytes of thumbnails stuck away in the EXIF data block. And that might not seem like much, but every little bit counts sometimes, and we just don't want these things all piling up here. So let's take a look at how we configure this. Configuring XnView is kind of a thing. I don't know that it necessarily appeals to much of anybody in the standard out-of-the-box configuration. So actually, the first thing that we have done here is the layout. What we have here, if you like this layout, is XnView's layout number 3, then modified by removing all of the things that I just didn't think were useful. And I arranged the panes and made them sizes that seemed to make sense for me. And then I went back to the main interface here. And here we can save layouts in the same sort of way that we can save workspaces in the Adobe programs. So there's that. But what about the information on the slide mounts? Well, let's go to Preferences. And here we are under Preferences, Browser. We have a little tick box for Use Tooltips. And if you consider the tooltips to be annoying, this is where you turn them off or on. And you could, of course, turn them on for certain uses, turn them off for others. And you can make a tooltip in this big dialog here. And the way this works is it's variables, which you insert out of this picker contraption, and strings, which could be HTML tags like that line break I just highlighted, or this label that I just typed in. Strung together, and you OK it. You can save it as a preset here, and you're good to go. So you can ultimately make up different kinds of tooltips that show you more or less information according to your desires. Now, making the tooltips and also turning on the labels under the slide mounts is discussed in a lot more detail in my Working with Metadata in XnView video that's already available on this channel. Our next stop is on the Thumbnails tab. And we go to Thumbnails and then Labels. And we have the same sort of thing. Basically, we're talking about variables, which are listed over here, and our label, which we build in this pane. And like so many other programs that work this way, we highlight something over here, we hit the button, and we pop it up over in this side. And it's just displayed line for line, pretty much as you'll see it on the page. Now, some of these are stock variables. File name is a stock variable. IPTC copyright is a stock variable. EXIF copyright is a stock variable. The second line that I displayed is a custom line, and I believe you are allowed 5 of these. You're allowed a gracious plenty of them, more than you'll ever need. And in this particular case, I constructed width times height, the variables, with a little x in between them, px for pixels, and then size in kilobytes, that's another variable, and then kb for kilobytes, that's just me typing. And as you can see here, we have buttons on the side, and we can change the colors of these things to suit our desires. And we have another tab in this preference for the overlay icons. Basically, turn them all on, and you can see at a glance what kinds of information is lurking where in your metadata. Now, if we were photographers and we were using XnView for what is nowadays called culling, that part of the editing process where we select our pictures, this is probably data overload. I think in that sort of a circumstance, I would be turning most of this stuff off and going for a much cleaner interface. And there are a number of ways that you could have a foot on both sides of that fence if you needed to. You could, for instance, make heavy use of the tooltips and simply turn it off when you were doing that kind of work, or however you want to do it. It's a very configurable program. That's both a good thing and a bad thing in this particular case, because if you don't configure it to meet your needs, it pretty much won't. Now, we also looked at our images. I mean, that's what we're here for. We really do need to look at these pictures. Simple enough. Double-click in XnView, and it takes you to a large preview. Now, you can have a large preview. The large preview is in tabs. You get one tab for every time you open up a large preview. The arrow keys within the large previews navigate you back and forth from photo to photo. And this is really cool. Here, I'll turn my little circle off for better effect. If you click and hold in the preview, you get 100% preview of the area under your cursor. Now, 100% preview is immensely important because it's only at the even multiples of 100% in this or just about any other photo editing program that you can actually see a realistic representation or an accurate representation of your picture. In other words, you check for sharpness at 100% or 50 or 25 or 12.5, not at any arbitrary in-between magnification. So 100% is really significant. And by the way, 200% and 400% work under the same principle. And in this particular picture, if you remember the first time, we were concerned that it might be overcompressed, and we looked, and in fact, it's pretty much fine, although up here where there's a bunch of gradients, we do see some JPEG artifacting, as well as some artifacting from the camera sensor. Now, to get out of the preview mode, you can double-click again, and you're back here, or you can use the Escape key, or you can use the Enter key. And if you're back out here in the browser view, by the way, you can use the Enter key. One click will take you to a full screen view that I'm sure looks pretty hideous because it exceeds the bounds of my video frame. Another click of Enter will bring you back around to the preview, the normal preview. And a third click of Enter will bring you back to your browser. When we went through these pictures the first time, we stopped on this particular frame, and I was not at all happy with the crop on this frame. And also, if you remember, we also noted on this frame that this photo is back-focused. Back-focusing is the scourge of the mechanical side of photography. It happens to everybody, and it's just really annoying. This photo is not so badly back-focused that we can reject it for that purpose. We really don't want to. But I think we could all agree that this crop needed some work. So let's look at that. In XnView, you pull out a crop box like you do in Photoshop and so many other programs. However, you have to use your Command or Control key in order to do so. That's actually not really even much of an inconvenience. You just have to know to do it. You draw out your crop. Once again, using your Command or Control key, you can move it around. You can tilt it back and forth. You can resize it. There you go. Now, in Photoshop or most photo editing programs, when you do something like making a crop, you save as your picture, then you go back to your original picture and you abort it carefully, making sure that you don't save any new changes into it. And especially in a circumstance like this where we're working with JPEG pictures 99% of the time, that's lossy compression, and you just can't accidentally save a JPEG over itself. It's just not something that you can do. In XnView, in any case, we have this button for Save Selection As, and it brings up this dialog, and all we have to do is give the photo that we've just cropped a unique name. And let's make sure that we actually save it back into, yes, we'll save it back into the correct folder this time. There we go. Cancel turns off your crop tool, and you can go on your merry way. Now, what if you want to make some minor adjustments to this photo? Well, hey, we have some tools for that here too. It isn't much. It's kind of crude compared to Photoshop, but if you just want to make some minor toning adjustments, you have it. Or, alternatively, we could, in fact, open the picture in Photoshop. We just use the right-click context menu to do that. We could go back to XnView, and we could drag the photo out to the Photoshop icon, and that's going to work just fine. And up here in the menus, we can do the same thing, as we can see over here. And let's turn my little circle back on. There we go. And as we can see here, as I was saying, we can assign a keystroke to our external editor. And in this particular case, it's Alt or Option 1. And if that suggests to you that you can define more than one external editor, you're exactly correct. So if it's a serious kind of adjustment, I would just open the picture in Photoshop and be done with it. Now let's look a little more carefully at the things that we looked at when we did go through these photos. The first photo here, according to our scenario, we didn't know anything about. We looked at it. We still don't know anything about it. There's no information on it whatsoever. The photographer didn't bother to put his own name on it. There's no caption. There's nothing. So we pushed it aside and didn't even deal with it. If we look at this next picture, file name is important not just because it's the file name, but also it tells us what type of file it is. And we can see pixel dimensions. That's really important. We want to know that they're sufficient for our use. And we can also see the size of the file in kilobytes. And if we look at our first picture here, it's 5,000 pixels wide, and it's only 4 kilobytes. And that's kind of a clue to us, when you get used to the relationship of these things, that this guy's been compressed pretty hard. And that's just something that we should look out for as we go through our process. If we look at the rest of these pictures, we can see at a glance that yes, they've got copyright notices on them. Yes, we recognize the photographer. There has got to be some level of trust somewhere in the process. And we have decided sort of arbitrarily that we trust this client enough, and we know that this client employs Susie Photographer all the time, and there's never been a problem with the wrong license or anything like that. So that's reassuring and that's good, and we can kind of move on. Yes, indeed, we have captions here, and I can see the whole caption right in this pop-up, and I can see that in most of these cases, these Susie Photographer captions, the caption's going to be perfectly sufficient. And when I import these photos into my website, or any WordPress website for that matter, or most professional publishing websites for that matter as well, that caption is going to be right there on the page, and it's only going to take a little bit of editing to make it right. We looked at this picture, and we noticed in this picture, when we looked at the caption, that there wasn't much there. This picture, whoops, let me select the correct picture. In this picture, we only have the back end of the caption, the one that has the photographer's credit on it. And we can see by the information that we see there that this is a Creative Commons picture. So we have to make a mental note to self, because we're going to have to deal with that appropriately in the credit for the picture. And we're also going to have to deal with the fact that we don't have a caption. We don't know what the heck kind of green plants these things are, and we're going to have to get in touch with this photographer. So we can see that really at a glance, and then we can drill down into it a little bit. And this is the one where indeed we found the contact information over here in these fields that XnView doesn't display for us in a very user-friendly manner. But it's no problem. We can call this guy up and find out just what the heck was wrong with him. Why didn't he provide us that caption information, and what kind of plant is it really? And by the way, that is my real phone number. We also noticed on this particular picture right here that this thing is already sized for the web. So it's a pretty safe conclusion that something untoward happened in the selection and packaging of this picture and its transit to us. And in fact, it is, yes, it is my own picture, and I actually chose it from my stock of demo pictures because it had this thumbnail, and I wanted to have some images that have the thumbnail attached to them so that you could see how the icon works, and so I could talk about how you could remove EXIF data block as a unit to get rid of that. And in fact, we'll also talk about how in XnView we can get rid of those thumbnails specifically, leaving the rest of the EXIF intact. But in any case, I just grabbed this thing, and I was a bit sloppy, and I would surmise that what happened in this particular picture was it began the process of being prepared. It got its boilerplate caption attached to it. or I'm sorry, its boilerplate metadata attached to it, and it just never got captioned. So that tells us something. Basically, as we look at all these bits of information that we can glean in just a few seconds on these pictures, we're looking for harmony. We're looking for how these bits of information interact with each other and interact with what we know about the situation. And we can just very quickly make management decisions based on that. Down here on this sunset picture, for example, the scenario was that we had been told to expect this picture, and it was from a new photographer, and we're going to cut him a little bit of slack. We're also going to email him and tell him about our standards for submitted pictures, and we will ask, just for the sake of due diligence, did he really sell the license that we thought he did to our client? And you would be surprised how many times, ladies and gentlemen, that I have called photographers and asked them that question and been told, oops, no, the license that the client bought didn't actually include me publishing the picture. A surprising number of times, I'll add, when I've asked photographers that question and they've said, no, I really didn't sell him a license that includes you publishing the picture. But since you were honest enough to ask, here's a license, gratis. That has happened to me dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So reaching out to photographers and confirming things like this can benefit you in a lot of ways. I mean, yes, you want to protect yourself from lawsuits, and yes, you certainly need to get the information that you publish to be correct. So those are hard reasons to do it. But you will find that you can build relationships and people will act kindly towards you. And there are all kinds of benefits from using the information that you get here and reaching out and just making sure that everybody is humming the same tune. So that's part one. In part two, we'll talk about determining exactly what it is that our particular websites require of us for images and physically getting them ready to meet those needs. Once again, I'm Carl Seibert, and until next time, mind your metadata.